Winter in the medieval world struck with a severity that tested every household, especially those without wealth or status. Homes were small, built from whatever materials the surrounding landscape allowed, and the cold seeped into every gap it could find. Yet these families learned to meet winter head-on, not with luxury, but with skill. Their lives depended on understanding how heat worked, how buildings breathed, and how to make the most of whatever fuel the land could provide. Popular depictions often show commoners living in constant misery, shivering inside fragile walls. The reality was more complex. Medieval people developed a quiet mastery of warmth long before engineered heating existed. Each home, no matter how modest, contained a set of practices that evolved from experience. Methods designed not only to fight the cold, but to trap comfort in the smallest possible space. Even the layout of a single-room dwelling held clues about where families slept, where heat collected, and how every ember of fire was used to its fullest potential. Their survival was not luck. It came from choices: how to build, where to place the hearth, what fuel to gather, how to insulate walls with limited material, and how to use every bit of warmth before it vanished into the night. They didn't see themselves as innovators, but many of their methods reveal a deep understanding of temperature control and resource management. The deeper you look into their homes, the more surprising these techniques become. Medieval families learned how to turn small fires into steady heat, how to manage smoke, how to create insulation from humble materials, and how to rely on one another when the cold pressed hardest. Far from helpless, they built warmth through determination and knowledge, transforming harsh winters into seasons they could survive with confidence. Medieval Europe delivered winters that shaped daily life as powerfully as any ruler. Cold was not an occasional inconvenience. It was a constant presence pressing against every wall and roof. Commoners faced this season with homes built from timber, wattle and daub, stone, or whatever material the region offered. These structures were functional but simple, and the cold exploited every weakness. Yet ordinary families did not wait helplessly for spring. They developed an approach to warmth based on experience, regional knowledge, and an understanding of how heat moved through small dwellings. The foundation of their survival lay in recognizing what a home could and could not do. A low ceiling was not a sign of poverty alone, but a deliberate method for trapping heat. Small rooms were easier to warm quickly. Thick walls, whether packed with mud, straw, clay, or stone, served as silent partners in resisting the chill. Every household member contributed to maintaining warmth, from tending the hearth to managing fuel supplies and sealing gaps before winter deepened. Understanding winter meant acknowledging its dangers. Illness, frozen water, brittle food stores, and nighttime cold that could numb fingers within minutes were all daily concerns. But through routine and discipline, medieval commoners found a balance. They knew when to bank the fire, how to manage smoke without losing heat, and how to position beds and sleeping areas where warmth lingered longest. This section sets the stage for exploring not just the physical tools they relied on, but the strategic decisions behind them. Warmth wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity protected through technique, material choice, and habits passed from one generation to the next. What appears today as a modest cottage held layers of intentional design meant to guard families against the long, unforgiving winters. The hearth stood at the center of medieval domestic life. It heated the home, cooked meals, dried clothing, boiled water, and signaled the rhythm of each day. For commoners, it was not simply a heat source. It was the engine that kept the household functioning. A well-managed fire meant survival. A poor one invited sickness, frostbite, and nights that felt endless. Wood was scarce in many regions, especially where forests had been heavily harvested. Families adapted by burning whatever fuel the landscape offered. Peat, dried turf, straw bundles, crop waste, and animal dung became essential alternatives. These fuels burned differently, some slower, some smokier, some hotter, and commoners learned which mixtures worked best depending on the temperature and the type of hearth they used. Smoke posed a challenge. Many early homes lacked chimneys, relying instead on smoke holes or simple gaps near the roof. Too much smoke risked damaging lungs and eyes. Too little heat risked a freezing night. The balance required skill. Families arranged the fire carefully, adjusting the size of fuel pieces and the distance between them to control both smoke and warmth. The hearth also required constant attention. Someone always needed to feed it, stir it, or bank it at night so embers remained alive until morning. Rebuilding a fire from nothing wasted precious fuel, so preserving heat through embers was a daily task practiced with precision. Despite its simplicity, the hearth reflected a deep understanding of fire behavior. Medieval people knew how to create concentrated heat in the coldest months, how to ration fuel during shortages, and how to position themselves to gain the most warmth. The hearth was not a rustic inconvenience. It was a practical, highly adaptive system developed through necessity. Medieval commoners built homes with whatever the environment provided. This meant architecture varied widely from region to region, but certain principles were universal. The goal was always the same: keep precious warmth inside. With limited resources, commoners became masters of natural insulation long before the word existed. Wattle and daub walls, woven sticks covered with layers of mud, clay, straw, and sometimes lime, held heat surprisingly well. When dried and hardened, daub became dense enough to slow drafts and trap warmth. Cracks were patched before winter, ensuring no cold winds slipped through untreated gaps. These walls aged, but families treated them like living parts of the home, reinforcing them rhythmically as the seasons changed. Windows were rare, glass was expensive, and large openings bled warmth instantly. Most homes relied on wooden shutters, which were kept shut through winter except for brief moments to release smoke or let in daylight. The darkness inside was a trade-off for heat retention. Roofs played a major role. Thatch created thick layers of trapped air that served as natural insulation. Constructed from reed or straw, thatched roofs held warmth effectively and provided shelter from wind-driven snow. Beneath them, ceilings were low so heat could gather rather than escape. Floors, often made of packed earth, were improved with straw, rushes, or woven mats that blocked ground frost. In colder climates, families placed livestock in attached structures so the animal's body heat warmed the adjacent rooms. These architectural choices weren't accidents. They reflected generations of understanding how weather interacted with wood, clay, stone, and thatch. Commoners transformed basic materials into protective shells capable of resisting long winters. Each home became a handcrafted solution to cold, simple at first glance, but remarkably effective when examined closely. A medieval home provided a foundation of warmth, but survival required a combination of personal habits and collective practices that extended far beyond architecture. Clothing, sleeping arrangements, daily routines, and how families organized themselves inside the limited space all contributed to maintaining heat through the cold season. Layering was essential. Wool served as the primary defense, valued for its ability to trap warmth even when damp. Underlayers of linen allowed moisture to escape, preventing chills that came from sweat during work. Cloaks, hoods, mittens, and foot wrappings completed the system. Clothing wasn't fashion. Every layer mattered. Inside the home, families relied on proximity. Beds were shared not only for comfort, but because shared body heat made a measurable difference during the coldest nights. Children slept in the warmest spots, often closest to the hearth or against interior walls, where thermal mass retained heat. Adults formed protective layers around them. Sleeping alone was rare, sleeping apart was impractical. Objects helped reinforce warmth. Heated stones, wrapped in cloth, were placed in beds before nightfall. Clay pots filled with warm water served as early bed warmers. Animal hides were layered over bedding to trap heat longer. Even straw, when changed regularly and packed tightly, offered substantial insulation. Daily routines shifted to preserve warmth. Work began later in the morning to allow the hearth to build heat. Cooking was timed, so meals warmed the home during peak cold. Doors were opened minimally. Every movement inside the house reflected an understanding that heat was precious and easily lost. Although daily life was harsh, these strategies allowed commoners to create an environment that felt stable, even comfortable, despite the bleak conditions outdoors. Their warmth came not only from fire, but from coordination, habit, and cooperation. Medieval families did not have the luxury of wasting fuel. Winters could be long, forests were sometimes distant, and competition for wood increased with population and expansion of farmland. As a result, commoners became experts in stretching every ember to its fullest potential. Firewood gathering began long before winter arrived. Deadwood was prized for its dryness, while green wood was avoided since it produced excess smoke. Regions with limited forests relied heavily on peat or turf, cut during warmer months and stacked to dry. These blocks burned slower and longer than wood, though with a distinct smell that became part of winter life. Animal dung served as a dependable supplemental fuel. When dried, it burned steadily and offered surprising heat output. In farming communities, storing dung for winter became routine, creating a winter fuel resource that required no money at all. Fire management techniques showed real skill. Instead of building large blazes, commoners favored small, tightly controlled fires. Large fires lost heat quickly and devoured fuel. Smaller fires, surrounded by stones or protective walls, concentrated heat where it mattered most. Banking the fire at night involved burying embers under ash or covering them with small pieces of dried turf to preserve their heat until morning. This reduced the need to start a fire from scratch, a process both fuel-intensive and time-consuming. Ashes were never discarded carelessly. They were used for cleaning, occasionally for insulation around the hearth, and even to absorb moisture in damp corners of the home. Nothing from the fire's life cycle went unvalued. Through these practices, medieval commoners demonstrated a precise understanding of fuel economics. Each choice, what to burn, when to burn it, how to bank it, reflected a disciplined relationship with the land. Heat was never assumed. It was earned through careful planning. A medieval home, though small, was divided into invisible zones based on temperature. Families learned how heat rose, how drafts moved, and which areas of the home held warmth naturally. By working with these principles instead of against them, they maximized the comfort provided by even the smallest fire. The area closest to the hearth remained the warmest. This became the hub of evening activity, meal preparation, conversation, and essential tasks. Benches, stools, and sleeping pallets were often placed strategically to capture as much warmth as possible before nighttime. Walls built from thick earth, timber, or stone held heat differently. Interior walls warmed slowly but retained heat longer, making them ideal spots for sleeping. Exterior walls cooled quickly, especially during storms, so families avoided sleeping against them unless absolutely necessary. The low ceiling created an intentionally compact heat zone. In the absence of chimneys, smoke drifted upward and out through small roof openings, but much of the radiant heat remained suspended just a few feet above the ground. Families organized their living spaces accordingly. Work, rest, and storage arrangements reflected the behavior of heat within the room. Drafts were well understood. Gaps near the door or roofline were patched regularly, and heavy curtains or wooden screens were placed near entrances to block cold air from sweeping across the room. Even small adjustments in furniture placement could reduce heat loss. Cooking pots simmered for long periods to maintain steady warmth in the center of the home. Iron tools, clay pots, and stones were positioned to absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night. These heat zones reveal something essential. Medieval people paid close attention to how warmth behaved. Their homes might appear simple today, but behind every arrangement lay a quiet, calculated strategy. In a medieval household, warmth wasn't just something produced by a hearth. Daily work itself generated heat in ways that shaped routines throughout the winter. Chores that required physical effort became opportunities to warm the body, reinforce comfort inside the home, and maintain an environment where activity helped offset the cold. Grinding grain by hand was demanding, but it warmed both muscles and the surrounding space. Kneading dough, chopping vegetables, hauling water from outdoor sources, or maintaining livestock created steady bursts of internal heat. Work became a natural heater. Clothing repair also played a role in warmth preservation. Stitching thicker layers, adding patches, and reinforcing seams prevented heat loss. Families often gathered around the hearth to work together, creating both warmth and shared efficiency. Cooking provided long periods of heat production. Even when food was simple, broths, stews, porridge, the boiling pot released steady warmth into the air. Slow cooking ensured that fuel was used efficiently while simultaneously heating the home. Many households structured meals around maximizing heat release during cold hours. Children contributed as well. Small tasks, gathering kindling, bringing straw for bedding, sweeping rushes, kept their bodies active and reduced the cold's impact. Their movement inside the home also stirred the warm air pooled near the fire. Livestock care created its own form of indirect heating. In homes built with attached animal shelters, the warmth generated by a cow, goat, or sheep provided a constant source of heat through the shared wall. The presence of animals transformed cold nights into manageable ones. Work was never viewed purely as labor. It was a practical response to winter. Movement generated warmth, and warmth made the work bearable. Through daily activity, medieval families turned even the simplest tasks into tools for survival. Medieval life thrived on community. Homes were close together, roads narrow, and villages compact. This physical closeness not only strengthened social bonds, but offered real advantages during winter. Collective heat, generated by people gathering, working, or resting near each other, became a profound part of surviving the season. Families frequently hosted one another in the evenings. Sharing meals meant combining heat sources. One family's fire might cook the meal, while the presence of many bodies transformed a cold room into a warm meeting space. Conversation, storytelling, and communal tasks created shared warmth that lingered long after gatherings ended. Community structures, bakehouses, workshops, barns, and taverns played essential roles in winter survival. The village bakehouse, used by multiple families, held heat in its thick stone walls long after bread was removed. People often completed chores nearby to benefit from the residual warmth. Workshops where smiths, tanners, or carpenters worked produced heat as a natural byproduct of their tools and fires. Festivals and feast days encouraged entire villages to gather in a single location. While these events had social and religious motives, they also provided relief from cold homes by concentrating warmth in communal halls. Even the layout of medieval settlements supported heat retention. Narrow streets blocked wind, and buildings positioned close together created small pockets where temperatures were slightly higher than the open countryside. This design was practical, not decorative. The community also shared resources. If one household struggled with fuel shortages, neighbors often helped. Mutual support meant fewer families faced winter alone. When people gathered, whether to work, rest, or simply talk, the result was warmth that exceeded what any individual home could achieve. Winter was never faced in isolation. Collective warmth was both a physical and emotional strategy woven deeply into medieval life. Medieval Europe stretched across climates that demanded unique responses to winter. What kept a family warm in northern England differed greatly from what worked in southern France or Central Europe. Each region adapted its homes and habits to match the climate, resources, and terrain. Northern regions, colder, windier, and wetter, required sturdy insulation. Homes often used thick timber, turf walls, or stone packed with clay to block drafts. Peat and dried turf served as reliable fuels, burning slowly through long nights. Roofs were steep to prevent snow buildup, and livestock shelters were frequently attached to the home to share warmth. Central Europe relied heavily on woodlands. Timber-framed homes with wattle and daub walls dominated villages. Dense forests provided ample firewood, but winters remained harsh. These regions often used tile stoves, precursors to modern masonry heaters, which stored heat from small fires and released it gradually. Southern regions had milder winters, but faced damp cold that penetrated stone floors and walls. Here, homes used thick masonry for temperature regulation and relied more on sunlight. Windows were larger, and shutters were open during the day to capture daytime warmth before being sealed at night. Mountain communities developed some of the most creative solutions. Houses were built partially into hillsides for thermal stability. Roofs and walls were reinforced against storms, and families positioned their sleeping areas in sheltered corners away from drafts. Coastal regions dealt with humidity and wind. Homes used layered insulation, rushes, wool, and wood shavings to stay dry and warm. Fires burned steadily to prevent mold during damp winters. These adaptations weren't random. Each design emerged from centuries of observation and necessity. Geography shaped heat strategies, and medieval people responded with resourcefulness that matched the landscape they called home. The methods medieval commoners developed to warm their homes reveal more than practical survival skills. They show a mindset built on adaptation, efficiency, and observation. Their homes were small, their tools limited, and their fuel supply often uncertain. But they understood their environment intimately and built their winter strategies around the realities of nature rather than wishful thinking. Their practices encourage modern readers to see warmth differently. Instead of relying on high-powered systems, medieval families created layers of defense: architecture, habit, community, clothing, fuel management, and shared effort. Warmth came from combining small actions that added up to lasting comfort. Their approach also reflected a deep respect for preparation. Winter was never taken lightly. Families stored fuel long before snow appeared, repaired walls and roofs in the autumn, and adjusted their daily routines the moment temperatures began to drop. Comfort wasn't an accident. It was the outcome of steady, mindful choices. Even the most modest medieval home held solutions that still resonate today. Thick walls for insulation, low ceilings to concentrate heat, communal gatherings to amplify warmth, and multi-purpose hearths that offered heat, light, and nourishment. These practices remind us that even with limited resources, people can create environments that support life through harsh seasons. The ingenuity of medieval commoners stands as a testament to how ordinary people, without wealth or advanced technology, survived winters that would challenge many modern households. Their legacy is not found in grand castles or noble estates, but in the quiet resilience of everyday homes built with intention and lived in with understanding. Their story shows that comfort does not always come from abundance. Sometimes it comes from knowledge, cooperation, and the determination to make the coldest season bearable.